Hello and welcome to this week's Author Spotlight. As always, I have a fantastic opportunity for you to learn from other authors that have been through the process. And today's no different. We have the wonderful Kevin Brent, who's going to be talking to us about his book, his journey, his highs and lows, and what he'd wished he'd known before. So without any further ado, please welcome on Kevin to the show. Kevin, welcome.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. Thank you very much for having me on.
You're very welcome. So, when was your book published? Let's just, I didn't tell you I was going to ask you that question, so now I just realised I hadn't asked you it before. So when was the book published?
Just a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 now.
So it's still a newborn baby, really, isn't it? In that sort of, it's in infancy. So
absolutely,
becoming a published author for you has been like what?
Oh, it's been great. I mean, it's certainly been a journey, and I've learned a number of things along the way, and it's a great feeling to actually have the book published.
So can you tell us anything else about that feeling when it's a great feeling to have that book published?
Well, there's something really exciting. It's one thing having it written down in a Word document or however you might write it down, but it's quite another when you get the first copy through the post and you can hold it in your hand and you have a look at it and you go, actually, you know what, that's what I wrote.
Yeah. I remember when mine came out from the editor thinking, oh, did I write that? That sounds quite good. Yeah, so there is something. But you do hear about those people, like it really does, when they've got it in their hand, it's something tangible, isn't it? It's something you can sort of say, actually, that's what I know, and that's what I've got to share. So tell us a little bit about the name of the book. I will pop it up on the screen so people can see it as well. So the name of the book, and why did you write this book?
Okay, so it's called The Entrepreneurial Scale-Up System, and the book is for business owners, for owner managers that are looking to scale their business. And the reason that I put it together is to support the business that I have. So it's a business called BizSmart, and we work with business owners all around helping to scale up. And over the last 10 years or so, we've learnt a lot. We've systemized everything we do, and it just seemed the right time to put that book together, because essentially it's not easy to scale up a business. And there's one of the stats that really struck me a while back. There's something like only 1%, in fact, it's more like 0.7% of businesses scale beyond 50 employees. But even beyond 10, only 4% of businesses scale beyond 10 employees in this country. And it was those numbers that just made me think, why is that? Okay, there might be a lot of people that don't want to, and that's fine. But what about the ones that maybe do, and they've got something about them and something about the business that maybe with a bit of extra support might help to unlock the potential within that and help them to scale up. And that's what it's about. And we just try to synthesize all of our learning into that resource of the book.
So you mentioned the support there a couple of times. One, the book's obviously going to support the business owner, and you talked about the book supporting your business. Just tell me a bit more about how it supports your business first, and then we'll find out a little bit more about how it supports the actual business owner.
Yeah, so it's something that we use. We run a lot of peer groups, where mastermind type groups, where we're working with small numbers of business owners and we're supporting each other on that scale up journey. And the book essentially has helped to give, we had the structure beforehand, the book's helped to really nail that structure, if you like, and make it much more tangible, so that all the people that we support, first of all, have got access to that book as well. But the way that we use it, and have always used elements of it even before the book was written, is that we introduce themes and topics on a monthly basis, and we work on a particular area, on a particular aspect. And of course, what the book's done is it's meant that we've got that detail there that everybody can really, really see, and they can think about it and think about whether it applies to them in their business at the moment, and then discuss it with some of their peers as to maybe any nuances within their own businesses, or maybe how they've applied it, or maybe sometimes how they've applied something else, because it's the thinking, the concepts that are important, not necessarily whether you do things in exactly the way that we say in the book.
Yeah. And I think there's something you said, just picking up on that bit, you said it's helped you clarify it by actually writing the book, because I think you become, I know I definitely did when my book is, you become much more consciously aware of what you're doing, why you're doing it, and also why it works. Would you say that's the same for yourself as you've been writing this book?
Yeah, I absolutely. And it's funny, somebody asked me at lunchtime just an hour or so ago, actually, how long it took me to write the book, and it and it's a difficult one to answer because it depends where you start the clock, doesn't it? I mean,
Absolutely.
you know where you end the clock, when it gets published or whatever else, but when do you actually start? Because really, I probably started the ideas for writing the book when I set the business up. Definitely. I mean, you could even argue before, but that was 10 years ago. It's our 10th year actually this year. And it's been through those years that we've honed the system and developed it, and we've built resources all the way along that route. So when it actually came to writing the book itself, I wasn't starting from a blank piece of paper. I'd got a lot of resources that I could then pull together. But as you say, it's the structure. Now, I thought that I'd got the structure absolutely nailed before writing the book, right? And we were very systemized in what we did. But in the process of putting it in a book, that really has helped to tweak things, actually to slightly reorganize and help me and the rest of the team to see things much more clearly ourselves, let alone then for our clients.
Yeah. Ironically, it sounds you're probably going a similar line to work to me, but we just do it for different purposes. I tend to work with individuals and personal relationships. But I think what you're saying is the book has helped you map out your processes, and that's effectively what you help other businesses do, is to actually get clear what their process is. And whenever we write it down and we have a discussion and we have conversations with people, glitches in our own systems and processes become, highlighted, don't they? You don't realize you're running on old software that actually I know better and I'm still doing the old thing here.
Well, and also when you're talking somebody through it, you're ad-libbing as you go, and you might go, I've got whether it's a PowerPoint slide or whatever it is, but you're adding stuff to it all the time. When you write it down, it's not just got to be, what you want to say, but it's got to be what other people hear as well. So when you write it down and then you kind of have it read back to you or fed back to you, and you think, hang on, no, that's not quite what I meant, or actually we need to add something else in here because it doesn't quite go all the way that we need it to go.
And do you find that's how you can use the book, though? Because you can give the book to your clients now as an added resource, so that you can carry on doing it at that other level, but they can go deeper if they want to go into the sort of the nitty-gritty of it through the book.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can literally, sometimes it feels a bit like going back to school, but it's like, have a look at page 94 to 97,
Yeah, do you know what? That's the bit I've absolutely loved about it, because I don't think I'd anticipated that initially with my own book. It sounds like we've got very similar, but it's really great to be able to say to me, well, actually, here's your homework, or field work as somebody's calling it recently. If you read that chapter in between sessions, it will consolidate what we've been talking about today. And some people need that, don't they? They need to be able to see it as well as hear it in order to process it and make that, embed the learning.
Yes, because all of us learn in different ways, don't we? Some of us like to read it off the written word off the paper. Some of us like to hear it. Some of us like to see it. So all sorts of different ways. And that's that. So it's really added that extra depth, if you like, to what we do. And we will also not just use it after we've had a discussion about something, but we'll use it as that preparation, as you were saying earlier on. So before we have the session, if we know the theme's going to be on a particular aspect of the book, then hopefully they'll have read that beforehand. Then we can have the discussion around it, which means that people can add their own experiences and knowledge to it. But then equally, as you say, people want to follow up afterwards. They've got that, they've got it there. And what I wanted with the book was that people would use it as a kind of a handbook, a manual almost, that they would keep with them. And they'll make notes in it, want them to scribble on the book. Don't want it to be one of those pristine books that sits on the bookshelf forever. And there's never, you can't see the crease mark down the down the cover.
All those people that don't like seeing books having horrible reactions right now, that day. But it's okay to have a notebook with the name of a book next to it as well. You can keep it in there.
You don't want to do that. But even highlighting sections or turning down page things, that's how I like to use a book. My wife is horrified.
I think that's the difference perhaps between sort of fiction though, isn't it? And self-help books. I know when I've had a really good self-help book, because there's lines underneath it, it's highlights. I've usually got 2 or 3 postcards in there with like little notes of where and the things that really stood out to me. So because you know that you're wanting to take on board. You're not just reading it for entertainment. You actually want to remember what you're reading. So
that's what, you know, I was delighted with one of the business owners that I asked to review it before I went to print, and just to see whether it was making sense or not. He fed back to me exactly what I wanted to hear. Really, which he read it all the way through, pretty much in one go, but highlighted sections along the way, and then he's gone back to those highlighted sections, and he's then implementing those when it's right into his business, and that's exactly what I like to happen. Read it from cover to cover and get the feeling for it, but as you go, you know what, that's important to me. I'm going to come back to that. We're weak in that area, or we could do better in that area. I'm going to focus on that bit next.
That's the lovely thing about having a book, though, isn't it? It's all in one place, and people can even look at the index and go, actually, they can sort of trust themselves and go, actually, I'm drawn to go here. I get a sense that this is where I need to be to review it, and they can work at their own pace and in their own models. Brilliant stuff. So what's been the most important thing that you've learned on this sort of process of actually writing and publishing a book? Saying that ever since you set the business up, you wanted to write one. What's been your biggest lesson?
Well, there's so many different things, and I guess it depends whether being strategic or tactical. But
well, you can do both. We won't limit you to one.
Great, good, thank you, good. Because I think the first thing, you know, really knowing why, you know, what's the book for? Why you're doing it? I think that was the really, and that, you know, I was pretty clear at the beginning as to what that was. It's supporting the business, and there were specific reasons why we wanted it, and could see where it fitted in the business. But without that, then I think that would have been a difficult book to write. But equally, then the structure, as I mentioned earlier, you know, I did have basically the structure there. Again, without that, I can't imagine how I would have started. It would have just been a ramble somewhere. But even from that, I had the structure. But the first time I gave it to somebody else, particularly to the copywriter, it was like, okay, well, I can see the sort of structure of the system, but actually, it's not rigidly structured as a book needs to be. We've got to have these different levels of sections and headers. So that was probably, you know, I'm a bit more of the kind of person, I like to do things once and not to revisit it too much. So that was a bit hard for me. Where it's like, well, I've done my bit.
and what's been the benefit though of revisiting it? What have you learned from that process?
Well, it has been useful, and what I've learned, I think, is that the big thing is that it doesn't matter how much you think about writing something down, people will read it or hear something different from what you intended. So it's having that come back to you is quite a useful thing, and it's like, oh no, that's not what I meant.
Yeah. And I think I think it's one of the reasons some people don't get round to doing the book, is the thought of actually having someone else giving them feedback on it, and it's that whole process. But it is quite magical when you can have a gap from it and it's left with the editor, and that it comes back a few weeks later. Because you do get sort of word blind with it all, don't you, as well, because it's your stuff, you're so close to it. So that feedback is invaluable, and I know that's where Karen and her team really do excel.
They do, and I learned from something Karen said, which was to get it out to a number of people before you go to print, if you like. And you know, I had some, and I was really blown away by the depth that some people went to. They didn't just kind of like flick through it and go, yeah, that looks really nice, Kevin, well done. You know, I got some really good feedback. You know, some people literally were highlighting sections and you know, and on the Word document and making comments and all the way through the book, which was really, really useful.
Yeah, it is so important. Karen and I talk about sort of having your sort of cheerleaders and having people that go through it, but you also need people that can critique it. So it's choosing those people very carefully, people who but you don't do it as your first peer review. Anyone watching this for the first time, do not get someone, your father or your mother who's really good at grammar, to check your first ever copy, because it could be soul destroying, because isn't the point.
I think Karen had a great template email to send out actually to people, and that was one of the things, wasn't it? Please don't comment on the grammar. That that will come through later. It's the other things that we're looking for.
But if you've got someone who's got like the person doesn't like you writing in books, if they've got a twitch when grammar's not right, that's a really big ask for them to go through an unedited, unproofread book and ignore all the grammars and typos. So definitely pick your people wisely there. What do you wish you'd known before you started the process of writing this book?
I think I wish I had known a bit more about the process in terms of making sure that first draft, for example, that I sent out to the designer and also to the copywriter, that probably could have done with an extra read or two through from me before I did that. So that that would have been useful. And something that's just come to light just recently is the value of, because again, as you said, we read what we want to read when it's our own stuff, and reading your own book back, it's hard. I can't. I actually don't think I can do it. I haven't got the discipline to go back and properly proofread my own writing. But what forced me to do that was I thought I wanted to have an audiobook version of it as well. So I have read it through and recorded myself reading the book. But that was after it actually went to print. And guess what?
You found a few things.
I found a few things, and which which down to me entirely, not down to anybody else. And but that discipline of sitting down there and reading your own words, but doing it at a pace where you're having to read it out loud is very different from when you're scan reading it yourself.
Yeah, and I think it's a really important thing, because I think there's that fine line with deadlines when you're pushing with a book to get it done. And I think people can go, right, I need to do this, I need to get to the editor by there because we've got those. And there's some real value in having some space between and slowing things down, because I think you need to have a gap, because it does take a lot of energy. Do you agree? Or maybe it's just my experience that when you think you finish, you send it off to the editor, it's like, and then of course it comes back and you've got a whole load of edits to do, and actually you're like, oh, I haven't finished.
And that I think I would have tried to, if the designer was great and gave me a schedule for what she needed from me, but I don't think I'd really appreciated from the copywriter exactly how much extra, how much time they needed from me really to do those extra checks. And I think that would have been a good thing to know, but also to then try and put it in your diary so you've got that time, because like all of us are busy, I'm sure, and the diary fills out really quickly, and then you find out the only time I've got to do this is between 7 and 8 o'clock tonight or something.
And I think the challenge, I know, because Karen and I've worked before on the author's journey, look at mapping out the process and what's involved. It is so different for every single person, because we don't know before you start the journey how good your grammar is, how good your structuring is, whether you're somebody like I'm a bit more of a spider, it goes all over the place and have to try and refine it back down. So I often have to work with development editors first to refine it down to a sort of the succinct stuff, and then it goes to a copy editor. And so I guess it's one of those things, it's not easy at the beginning of the journey to articulate or even give people a heads up, because until you start writing and start producing something, and it's often for people, it's very different to any other writing they've been doing before. Because you're having to hold an awful lot more information spatially than if you're perhaps writing an article or a blog or various other pieces together. So
and I think one of the other things that again helps you, I had a deadline in mind, and it was a real deadline. We were recruiting our first franchisee, and they weren't in the pipeline when I started with Karen, but they came on fairly soon after. And it became clear that they were going to be starting at the beginning of October. This was back in February or March, somewhere around that time. And that I wanted to have at least the first draft available to help them through the training of that franchisee coming on board. So that gave me timeline, a point at which to work the timeline back from. And I do remember, I don't know, Karen may remember this, but I do remember in one of those early ones saying, well, how many words is a typical business book?
Yeah.
Because I had no idea, and I
Yeah.
think she said 50 or 60,000 words, something in that order. Okay, and then how quickly and how many words a minute or how many words an hour, should I bank on, sort of thing? And I think she said something like, well, if you know what you're writing about and you're reasonably okay with it, maybe 500 words an hour, something like that. And you then go, okay, I can work out how many hours that is, right? So if I just wish it to happen by October, it isn't going to happen.
No. Yeah.
So
You do. It needs that commitment.
I need to allow this amount of time in which to do it. So when's that going to be? But then also having the structure, and that's the way I did it. Is I knew roughly how many chapters essentially I'd got within the book, and it was like, well, if I don't have those chapters done by the end of April, then that means I'm behind, and if I don't have that one then done by the end of May, and whatever else, and it then meant that if I was behind by the end of a month, then I could make the decision to spend a bit of a weekend working on it, or if I was on schedule, then fine, I just blocked out time of the day when I felt that it worked for me to do it, and I just did that on a regular basis. But occasionally I put in a few extra hours over a weekend or something because I had the deadline in mind.
That's one thing I love about Karen is her ability, because she really is good at holding you account to that structure and that accountability and making sure that you're there and working those deadlines back. So what was the lowest point for you on this journey?
I think there was there was a little bit of that low point when I realized how many hours that was going to be, but actually that was not too bad, because it was early on and I could see the structure. There was a point about halfway through, I think, where it was harder than I thought. That the one of the chapters just took a bit longer and it was a bit harder than I thought it would be, and that was then felt a bit like an uphill struggle. And it did become, there was a point where it's just a little bit of a slog, but then again, once the finishing post was in sight, again, that motivation came back again. So
So what worked for you to get from that sort of that low point to the motivation coming back?
I don't think there was anything particular. I just worked through it, really. It really did come down at the end of the day to wanting to get it done by a particular date, and having a good reason as to why that was. It wasn't just a case of, well, it'd be nice if it was October. It was pretty important that it was October. So I think that was key. And then just mapping out the time, just trying to get control of the bits you could do, and just, okay, let's just do it. I've put aside that hour or those 2 hours today. I've ring fenced it, not putting anything else in it, and just do it, even if I didn't quite feel like doing it.
Yeah,
I just had to do it.
Fabulous. And what's been your biggest success to date?
In what respect? In terms
in relation with the book, in terms of what the impact of the book, or
I think what's made me feel really good, the thing that really was great was when some of those initial peer reviews that just went to the next step of that and actually got people then to give me a review of the book. So that was great, because there were a good number of our clients that were quite happy to write a really positive review, and those are they're in the book, including people like Mark Wright, who's he runs Climb Online, but he won The Apprentice back in 2010, I think it was. But he wrote a lovely foreword. I just asked him to have a look at the book and some comments, and he just came back with a really, really great comments, which he agreed then. I asked him if he'd be happy to have that as a foreword, so that was great. But then also the thing that, as I said right at the beginning, the things that gave me some real satisfaction was, one, getting the author's copy, the physical copy, through the post that I could have in my hand. That was probably great. It was great.
Do you have a copy with you to show us?
There's a copy, as if by magic.
As if by magic.
And then I think the other thing, because it went on pre-sale, of course, and you don't know whether anybody's going to buy it or not. The first time, I think Sam gave me some numbers, was probably about 3 or 4 days after it had gone live. and we'd sold 70 books in that period, which I was delighted with. That was my nightmare would have been none.
One. One or none.
Yeah, one, and that was the one you bought, Kevin. Yeah.
It is that horrible moment afterwards. Oh, that's fantastic stuff. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm just going to pop the link so if people want to find out more about your book. So if you are a business owner and you want to scale up, then this is the book for you. And a quick reminder of the name of that book is there, Entrepreneurial Scale Up Systems by Kevin Brent. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today. And I look forward to hearing what happens next and perhaps having you back with more success stories. Thank you, Kevin.
I'd love to. Thank you, Cheryl. It's been a delight to talk to you. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. So that's the end of today's show of the Author's Spotlight. So if you are a budding author, I want to invite you now to think about what needs to happen to make your book happen. And if you are struggling and you need support, then please get in touch with Karen from Librotas Books. Speak to you soon.